Hello.
Welcome to Beachside Tech Talk. We're here at the beach. Pacific Ocean is behind us. We're here with our friends, our co-hosts of this glorious team. Welcome Dan from the Yaptos Forest, Nigel from the East Coast, Malachi from down the road over in the unincorporated ghetto of Santa Cruz.
I'm in the ghetto?
You used to
I
be.
refuse.
There is no more ghetto. And we got Ted with us, but his camera's not on, so you can just hear his beautiful voice. Happy Monday, everybody.
Yeah, happy Monday.
It's so
Happy
happy.
Monday.
Malachi had a pretty fun thing happen yesterday. Why don't you tell him what happened right out here in Capitola Beach at the ocean? You did something fun with another 70 people.
Our show is Beside the Beach, and it's a tech talk. And yesterday, beside the beach, in the water actually, I got to get baptized with all my friends there and a few family members, and it was very enjoyable. And I feel so blessed to get to live in this amazing town. And the fact I get to do this show with some of my favorite people, it's such a beautiful opportunity.
Most excellent. Let's bring Teddy back on stage. What do you think, Ted?
Malachi
just got
yeah,
baptized yesterday.
that's awesome. Malachi, why'd you get baptized?
Because I'm saved.
Okay,
Because
what
the
is
Lord-
somebody?
Wait.
The Lord
That's,
Jesus
wait.
Christ is
Hold
there.
on. Hold on. You. That's the reason why you got baptized is because you were saved.
Yes.
Saved from what? You'd been in the water and there was a shark, and your dad had gone out and
Yes,
swum and
yeah,
saved
of
you
course.
from that. Tell me more. No, assume I don't know anything. Okay.
Well, I mean,
I'm just watching Nigel laugh.
You've been
It's so
saved
funny.
for a while. You know what? Did you just get
course.
saved last week? What?
No, but it's a public declaration.
yeah.
A public declaration. Declaration of what?
Of my Jesus followingness.
Bro, Malachi's name is now written in the book of life, brother.
Oh, it was before. You don't have to be baptized.
You got
to
capital letters,
have your
man.
name there.
You might want to be saved.
So tell me the history. I'm not joking. I want to hear more about this. When did you become a Christ follower, and why did you make the decision yesterday to be baptized?
Well, I think
And what
most
does
of my
baptism
life,
mean to you?
I think most of my life I've lived in a kind of family who's always considered themselves Christian, but I never really knew what it meant or what it meant for me. I kind of just was going through life, and that was fine with me. But eventually, I kind of realized about 2, maybe 3 years ago that there actually is meaning to life and that I'm not just going through the rhythms. And I started to actually care about it. And the whole concept of Jesus just felt so beautiful to me. It felt so attractive. And I wanted to learn more. And I just have over time. And I've gotten to spend more and more time with the creator of all things, who Jesus was so close with and in a way was. And now I was seeing that was happening yesterday. My group that I go to, they were doing a big baptism, and I thought I might as well do it now. So
it was a spontaneous decision for you? I mean, the baptism itself was a spontaneous. So when you say you're spending time with the creator of the universe and getting close to Jesus, I mean, what does that mean? Did you get taken up in a fiery chariot and spend a few months in heaven? Or how were you spending time with the creator? What does that look like for you?
I'm smiling. I'm enjoying life. I'm trying to be thankful. I'm trying to live in a Jesus way.
Well, I'm proud of you, son. I'm proud to be your dad. It was fun to be able to
I feel
participate.
so lucky to be your son, Dad.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
inviting me to do the baptism. I baptized a couple dozen people over the last 20 years in the ocean, usually unauthorized. I've had plenty of pastors and churches get angry with me. How dare you baptize apart from our, I don't know, whatever sort of thing that they wanted to do. but it was nice to participate. And there were 70 people that got baptized yesterday, which is, significant. Probably 500 people came out for it. It was definitely special.
What event was this? Was this just a spontaneous baptism or
baptism? Yeah. And also at church yesterday, I couldn't find a parking spot. There was like 40 cars driving around. And this is including not just the church parking lot and the school parking lot, but also the college parking lot.
Really?
Like there was nowhere to park. I had to park super far away and ride my one wheel, which gave me a good excuse to ride a one wheel. So praise the Lord. And I do think that there's a significant impact that technology is having right now upon people desiring to at least go investigate, putting more energy into their spiritual life. Now, I feel like I really started to see this globally when we were traveling around the world. We're in the Middle East, Europe, Asia, all over the United States. And I was noticing after the pandemic that there was a greater hunger and desire to go explore faith communities. And oftentimes I had been exposed to that happening in the evangelical and Catholic world of Christianity, but I imagine this is the case for Jews and Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists. I imagine a lot of these faith communities are having a stronger attraction for people to investigate. But I do think that what's happened with Charlie Kirk's assassination has probably elevated this. And so one thing I want to talk with you guys about today is the different way that people perceive what they see on the internet or through these social media technology platforms, the way they perceive things when they ask AI a question. Like if we're to ask AI a question compared to somebody that's like a hardcore MAGA Republican and their whole newsfeed is only, glorifying that methodology and demonizing the other. And then what might somebody perceive if they're talking to AI or on social, if they are, what would be perceived as left or progressive or something, Democrat, something of that nature. So I'm sitting yesterday and I'm watching the Charlie Kirk memorial service with like 100,000 people there physically present in Arizona, Trump's entire administration. And I find myself personally encouraged. I'm encouraged by some of the things that were said on the from the stadium. I was certainly encouraged and thankful that Charlie Kirk's wife would be willing to use her voice to extend forgiveness. I think that her heart may still need to catch up with her declaration. I'm not sure that forgiveness is all that simple, especially when somebody has assassinated your husband. And as more things come to light, if it's just him that did it alone or if other people were involved, I imagine that she will have to continually have to go back to that desire to be a forgiveness-oriented person. But I was encouraged because remember when we found out Charlie was shot, the first thing I talked about was the tension between justice and mercy, between vengeance and forgiveness. And, I think where I've come to stand is I expect the government to bring forth justice. That's the government's job. I expect humans to try and be open to forgiveness, if at all possible. And that was Erica's choice. So I found that to be encouraging. I thought Trump was pretty funny. He turned to Erica after she did her forgiveness talk, and he's like, I hate my enemies. So I found that to be encouraging. I thought that was so funny, man. The guy says the stupidest, funniest things. But, I think he said it as like a comedy deal.
That might not have been funny to a lot of people.
I don't know that matters. But what I want to get to is what you just said, how people perceive things differently through technology. Because here was my walk away last night. It is really easy for me to be encouraged by what I saw yesterday because I aligned and resonated with things that were said. And I was like, oh, this is a wonderful outcome of what's happening. Like there's much worse outcomes. We could have gone into a bloody revolution last 2 weeks. There could have been a lot more murders. There could have been vengeance. I mean, there could have been a different response. So I'm very grateful that this is so far what's happened. However, I was thinking, like, what if I was an atheist? What if I was
revolution last 2 weeks?
What if I was
there
a
could have been a lot
Democrat?
more murders. There could have been vengeance.
Whoever's playing the live stream, maybe go on mute before you do that. I'm asking myself these questions. What if I didn't resonate with this? What if I was opposed to the things that Charlie stood for and believed? What if I really was against the rhythms of Trump's administration? How would I feel today? And I'll tell you, what I took away was that I would feel super frightened. If I was an atheist, agnostic, if I was a Democrat, if I was opposed to everything that Trump and his administration stands for, I would feel so scared of the wave of Christian nationalism that seems to be like a tidal wave about to crash. Now, for the six of us, we might think this is cool and we might love it. We might resonate with a lot of it. And all six of us might resonate with different parts of it. But we have to recognize there are a large portion of people that do not believe what we believe. They don't align themselves with these belief systems. And when you see the government and you see the private citizen thing going on, I mean, yesterday, Elon Musk posted part of Jesus' prayer, how to pray. It says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others who trespass against us. There was a large number of very famous people on the internet that have never really talked much about their faith that basically are now clearly declaring something that is very faith oriented. Almost like the tide has turned so strongly against Christians have to shut up and be quiet and not be heard, to now we're the ones with the loud microphone. And that may be good for us. Our perception of it may be good for us. But as Dan just said, when Trump says, I hate my enemies, if you are perceiving yourself as one of his enemies, how is that going to feel? That even after a woman says, I forgive the murderer of my husband, when the chief stands up and goes, good for you. Charlie might be mad at me, but I hate my enemies. I don't want good for them. How would that feel? How would that feel? Because technology is the thing that has caused us to have access to this. We all had access to this because thousands of different media arms were broadcasting this experience live. And tens of millions of people are commenting, and the majority of the comments are going to be quite positive. And so if you don't feel positive about it, and if your news feed is just full of fear and anxiety, and if you don't align with this and you see this as being creating an environment where you don't feel safe, I think that it's a worthwhile thing to talk about. Because if it was the opposite, if yesterday there was a massive thing that made Christians feel unsafe, Christians feel like they were hated by the leader of the government, if that was in reverse, if yesterday was a thing that was oriented, if it was a socialist, communist, Marxist thing, and it was all in opposition to nationalism, it was all in opposition to Christianity, and that was the vibe of the moment, and that was the rhythm of what was happening. And we have to imagine people in our world might feel like, oh boy, this is bad news. I think that technology inflames these things. I think that AI probably is inflaming these things when people are going and asking questions because it's saying what people want to hear. I think their social media feed probably inflames these things. So I've just been trying to put myself in an empathetic, sympathetic, thoughtful place, and not to be overly enthusiastic about all of my feelings around the turning of the tide, and recognizing that even if I resonate with a lot of this, some people are full of anxiety around it. So that's what I wanted to share. Maybe you guys want to jump in and share your thoughts on what I just said.
So if you familiar with the term syncretism? So I'll explain the concept. Syncretism is when, like two religious thoughts come together and maybe one absorbs the other, or they influence each other. So like an example of this would be, like when Catholicism came into the New World, its influence on the indigenous people, and this is not monolithic, but in some places, their culture, they embrace Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, at one level, but they retained their previous, worldview. So, like, there's like a culture where they worship San La Muerte, which is Saint Death, and that did not come out of the Christian heritage. There's no place in the scriptures or among Jesus's original disciples where they were worshiping Saint Death, but there had been a local cult to this death thing that was used by a different language, and so they put Catholic Christian language over that. That's known as syncretism. So if you're, I suppose there's some cultural anthropologists that would observe it and say it's a good thing, but like most leaders, at least in the Protestant evangelical.
Teddy.
You just press mute. You got to unmute yourself.
Okay, so okay. So here's where I'm going with this. If there's a core value, if we present ourselves as Jesus followers, we're saying, what does that mean? If you're a Christian, that means you're a little Christ. You're a follower of Jesus Christ. So if a core value of Jesus is one thing and you do an opposite thing of that, then, maybe you're not a Christ follower. So we like to, and in many ways, Trump doesn't fully, but in many ways, Trump has certainly presented himself to appeal to the evangelical base. And he has in some ways presented himself as a Christian. I think those who are in the MAGA camp have magnified that. And I think people around him have amplified and spoken on his behalf and presented him as a Christ follower and as the savior for Christianity in America and all that. But if a core value of Jesus is forgiving your enemies, and then if you have Kirk's widow forgiving her enemies, and then Mr. Trump coming out saying, I don't forgive my enemies, I don't love them, I hate them, is that syncretism? It's not really a Christ follower, is he? And do we as Christ followers magnify in the fact that, wow, now the culture has shifted and this is wonderful? Or are we also equally grieved that this thing that is being presented as Christ following has this element in there that is completely antithetical to the teachings of Jesus?
Well, I'd love to hear from the other guys. I don't really take what he said totally serious. I think a lot of things that Trump say are to inflame people, get their attention. And I think he knows that there's a lot of heavy hitters on the stage. And if he wants to make sure that he gets in front of the news, he has to say some crazy things. Not to say that it justifies it, and not to say that he didn't mean it, but because a lot of jokes we make have elements of truth in them. But it wasn't a big takeaway for me. I thought it was a kind of a silly thing to say, but I don't think other people necessarily thought that way. And when it comes down to Trump's faith, I don't really judge anybody. It's not my place to judge. I do recognize that, like J.D. Vance yesterday said, that he's talked more about his faith in the last week and a half than he has for his entire time in public office. And I do think that that's how the tide has turned. People that were once hesitant to speak about their faith or would just sprinkle it in like salt are now like full-blown Like that's the meal. It's not the seasoning. Like that's it. That's what they want to talk about. So we'll see how it all unfolds. But back to the big idea of how does technology, the access to AI that says what we want to hear, the access to social media, news feeds that we are cultivating for ourselves, how does this play out in this experience where people are having different views of the same exact thing? So, love to hear from Dan, Nigel, or Malachi on the stuff that Ted just shared.
I'm thinking that we need to question if we're doing things that are pleasing God as believers. All of it. Start there. I think if we do that, it's going to start to play out in what we see in AI, because AI is just mimicking what we're already doing. And the more difficult part is because so much of what it seems like we're doing is performance theater.
Big
and
time.
not our authentic self. That's what you're going to see playing out. So to me, I would say this, and I'm not saying, this is not a judgment of any type. I'm just saying that I think this can be a path forward that might be a bit more constructive than anything that's there now. If we challenge ourselves to behave in a more Christ-like manner, word, deed, thought, I think this plays out in a much better way. And if we move further away from things that are convenient to the present moment in talking about, God or faith or anything like that, because for me, we talk about faith amongst ourselves all the time. It didn't, Charlie had no impact on that. Trump has no impact on that. This was happening before them. It'll be happening after them. That's just what it is. I do believe, however, there is some truth to, there seems to be more talk about it, which is a good thing. I just would like to see the behavior align more with the talk. And I think that's a challenge and, something that we have to hold ourselves accountable for, because the words that we're saying, the better they match the deeds that we're doing, because we could say we forgive, but not really forgive. We could say that we're, we believe and we follow these teachings, but we're out saying reckless things, with no regard, to what's on the other end. But I would say this, I think if you look at another human being and you see God, chances are you'll behave better. And I'll leave it there.
Well, I agree with that. There's a sense of accountability that's there, Nigel. I have a strange take on all of it myself. I kind of think, okay, what if this incident had happened a year ago? Would have been extruded in a whole different manner. In other words, you'd have a different president in place. Who knows what would happen? It'd be totally different than the way it's being handled now. I watched a lot of the eulogy yesterday for Charlie Kirk, eating a meal. I thought it was great to have such an honored thing for a speaker. I don't know what office the gentleman holds. I don't think he holds any public office. I think that he has his own business and agenda with his Turning Point, which was great. What I saw in a stadium would have been nice. I see ultimate division is where I'm going. To this year, we've had one assassination of attempt on your highest holder of office that there is, and then an actual assassination success. And it seemed to come from the same side. So in my opinion, no matter how lightly that we're looking at it, it seems there's been 2 acts of civil war that's actually happened in some degree. You have a nation here that's willing to go beyond. Nigel, what's in absence of reason, we have extreme. So That's great. And I think that that's exactly where these things go, because apparently we have sort of lost the reasoning aspect of it to where we can have a debate or a talk or a discussion with individuals who don't necessarily agree. And I think that is the most important thing to keep civil in our whole country. We need to be able to have discussions like we're doing now. I don't see, we're all like-minded right here, but even if one of us six, said something that I completely disagreed with, I would either hold my tongue or let it be, because I'm going to respect the way that person feels. It's not going to get me to where I'm ready to pull out the slingshot right on the screen here and pop that person out of my camera view right now. I'm not going to feel that way. Technology is amazing that it has been able to, in a matter of 45 minutes or within an hour, bring millions of people together. What I was watching yesterday seemed to be sort of one-sided. The biggest takeaway my eyes saw from the stadium yesterday was on every tier and level of seating as it went up, there's huge red banners going around the whole thing. The auditorium, the venue seemed like it was more red than any other color. And that was a little, very interesting. My thought would have been, in something so big as that, it would have been so great to see some blue come, and I'm not trying to go into a one side, other side, but there's got to be a middle ground that people are going to start talking about, using this technology that we see and use every day, because we have become combative towards each other. Either you think a certain way or you don't. And then that's great. You can stay on those two sides, but there's a big chasm between it. And we're not really willing to shake hands and, part at the end of the conversation and say, well, that was interesting. I'm going to think about what that other side said. It's more, do I have enough bullets? Do I have enough? I'm stocking myself up for either verbal warfare at the beginning, and then if it's not that, then yeah, we're starting to pull out literally weapons and armament in these in our country that we're trying to become. We don't have to be one-minded, but we do have to be civil with each other. We can't have these things happen. We must present ourselves as the nation with the most reason. I feel we are the smartest. That's my opinion. We have the most diversity of any nation on the planet. You have the most capabilities for all ideas. We have more availability to have more open discussions than any other nation does, in my opinion. We're very, very, we're a melting pot of everything. So we're in a position to set the example, to make things right in a disagreement in a nation. That's where I'm at.
But we're not living up to our potential in that. Is that what you're basically saying?
I pray for and then we're going as far as my my religion and my thought on that. I'm keeping them a little bit separate. I'm not trying. I work on my relationship with my Lord is super faith based. So I'm not just hoping, I'm also believing and checking in with God many times of the day. And for me, first and foremost, is I just hope that I'm serving and making him pleased. And if I'm doing that, then maybe I have something to offer outside of myself. But if I'm not, or if I'm not sure of it, then I'm just going to keep everything here, form my databases, get my files going. And then when I have something juicy, I'll release it. Once I know that I'm content with where my words are going to come out of my mouth, that I can stand behind it.
I asked, I'll let you jump in 1 second, Malachi, just to respond to what Dan just said. I did ask Grok, Chat GPT, as well as Gemini, if any prominent Democrats were at the event. And
I'm sure there were, right?
No, it said no. It said no. Now,
well, come on.
Its definition of prominent might be different, but the thing I want to acknowledge is this was a turning point event. So this event was put on by Erica, the new CEO and chair of Turning Point, a $100 million nonprofit organization that sole purpose is to bring forth Christianity and nationalism in America. Therefore, I would expect all of the invites to go to their donor base, powerful Republicans, powerful Christians. I imagine that if Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or any of them would like to have attended, that they would have been given a seat to attend. I also want to acknowledge that it wasn't that long ago that Trump was a Democrat, Tulsi Guy was a Democrat, RFK Jr. was a Democrat. You go down the list.
Right.
People that were formally part of that institution of progressive liberals that have left that. Go ahead.
Okay, so just real quick on that, I appreciate that, and it was a turning point event, and it was even if it was an invite only, I'm still thinking if especially Charlie, his conversations more recently were more faith-based and theological than anything else. Where do you be Christ-like more than at a time of ultimate tragedy or ultimate separation, that you extend the olive branch, that from the red side, that there should have been, and they could have doubled down on it if they wanted to. They should have thrown all the invites out to the blue. They could have doubled down back on it, said, we sent all these invites out to, they didn't want to come. I'm going get away from red and blue. I'm talking about, let me go left Christian. Or maybe that's blue. How about Christian? You know, we keep talking about, or Charlie, we're talking about this faith-based system. And I think Charlie's trying to put that before any of his conversations. So he's leaning into, I'm a Christian and I'm faith-based before any of the subject matter that we're talking on. And I'm just throwing out there, you know, more Christ-like would be, I would have liked to see a mix, and I hope to see soon some other people coming from other sides, any side, left, right, middle, center, front. So it's not so one event put on by a Turning Point. Awesome. Turning Point put it on. It would have been so great if they would have put invitations out, not in a condescending way, in a Christ-like way, super serious, open doors. We want all Christians to come. I think they would have got an amazing, like kind of a different thought process by seeing Schumer, or that's pretty high up there. I'm talking about assembly people, anyone who's not all, just for the fact that we're all Christ-like in a family, in a book of life. And what happened was I wanted to come and share and pay my respects to an individual, not to a party platform.
Malachi, you want to jump in? Please go ahead.
I was going to say that in this world where we are so quickly transforming everything, now we have AI that happened in like 2 years. Bam, that's there. And now we have these things, this cell phone that now gets me, I can find out anything happening in the world pretty much in like 2 minutes. And that brings this really unique ability of being able to see almost everything happening, at least on a surface level. And I think when that occurs, I want to make sure that I say, people are going to be angry. That's what people do. We're human. We have the human condition. But the only way to make it not become the bloody revolution that we've talked about in the past, that nobody really wants, even if they think they do, but instead to be the reform that actually brings good transformation and happens in a safe and productive way, then we have to make sure that we're all trying to go for that. Which is kind of like a dumb thing to say, but then it almost feels like once I point it out, it's like, yeah, if we keep on talking about how, well, they did that and so now I'm angry. Like, maybe the people who were Democratic wouldn't want to go to the convention because they're worried of what some Republican guy who brought a gun would do. Like, that's a fair thing to be worried about. They might stereotype in that way. And so the only way that we can actually bring a good transformation is by trying to go for the Reformation, trying to do it in a way that I would say personally that Jesus would, because gosh, he did like everything right.
Well, nobody does anything. Nobody does everything right, obviously, but I understand. Yeah,
I'm saying for the example of it,
I
you should
understand.
try and pursue the good example.
I do think that there was a recent bill that just passed in Congress, and the bill is framed by the Republicans as a condemnation against political violence. And potentially, if it was only a bill that everybody in Congress agrees political violence is wrong, maybe there would have been unanimous support. However, in the bill also honored Charlie Kirk's life and legacy. It honored Charlie's free speech, and therefore the Democrats were split. About 100 voted in support of it because they didn't want to say they didn't disagree that political violence is bad, but about 100 either voted no or said we're not voting. And I think that also kind of spurs this gas on the fire of division, where when there's a bill presented that is being presented as a political violence is bad, but then tied into it is, and we're honoring Charlie Kirk, what he's about, what he did. He's the champion of free speech. Then it makes it challenging for people that may have been willing to agree that political violence is bad because they don't want to sign a bill that's like a kind of weird worship of a political powerhouse that got Trump elected. And then the whole media machine and social media machine and AI machine can basically turn and tweak things to be like, look how evil Democrats are. They all voted again. Half of them voted against political violence is bad. And this is the type of thing that I think you just hear, you read a sentence, you hear a 10-second talking point, and then you go, oh my gosh, 100 Democrats think that political violence is acceptable. This is very bad. Let's not invite them to the Turning Point Charlie Kirk Memorial Service. Yeah, and this is kind of how the division happens, right? And a lot of this is because there's a lack of context. And I'm not an advocate against that bill. Had I been asked to sign it, I would have signed it, even though maybe I think it's a little bit strange the way that one person is kind of exalted and praised and honored. And I like when his wife says things like he was the perfect husband. I'm like, oh boy, don't say that. Please don't say that. No such thing as a perfect husband. Let's try to be honest about things, everybody. So even though I kind of feel that way, I also recognize that like in moments like this, there's a strong inclination for people to glorify him and speak in 9s or 10s. He's perfect. He was the perfect boss. He was the perfect leader. He was the perfect advocate for free speech. And then speak in 1s and 2s. Like he deserved the death. He said that it's better to have the Second Amendment and some people that are innocent die. That's what he deserves. Like, and so you have this massive division of 1s and 2s that demonize and 9s and 10s that glorify because there's so much heat in the moment. And I do think that a lot of the things we're discussing
yeah. I like Charlie's talks, man. I mean, I always like a guy that's got some savviness to him. Dude can really talk. I thought it was sort of unfair to go to campuses and to try to debate, people who are excited and they really want to say something. They don't know what they're saying. They have no idea how to say it. You can see the anxiety in the people's who are trying to, and Charlie is an expert at it. So it was almost unfair. He gets to go to places with a full loaded barrel. It's his event. It's his everything. And he's a professional at speaking in debate fashion. And he's pretty brilliant. But I think that's kind of got him into trouble with some things because it felt divisionary. Regardless, I didn't take it like a right or wrong thing. It was like, man, these people are not good. It's a debate, but it's not to at all really unify. We're not getting any unification here. Even those, the ones that I watch, people are getting upset and leaving more angry than they came, and people cheering in the audiences for either the debater or the recipient, either Charlie or it's the other person. So I hope that we can, as soon as everyone can feel better about the event that's happened, that maybe there's I don't have any answers, but there's got to be some form of unity. We need to be more more Christ-like. We need to be just take a little moment back again. What would have happened if this had happened a year ago?
Very, very different. We know that much.
Very, very different.
Very
So and so what I'm saying, an incident happened that was an incident. That incident is the same whether it happened a week or a year ago, but very different outcomes. And that's all my mind's trying to do, is because if it would have been before, it would have been a completely different outcome. And we don't fortunately have to deal with that. But the point is that times and the way that we're talking and people and whatever's being propagated or whatever we use in technology, I hope that I pray for us that we get semblance of resolution through Christ. That because that's to me that's the only answer is going to be we are not going to find these answers with a talk, with a discussion, with a debate. We better tap into something that's outside of this fleshy thing for accountability, for longevity, in other words, for your life. The decisions we're talking about, these type of things, saving a nation and unifying a nation, is for our livelihoods, for our life, to have a better life in this nation. So we have to come together one way or another.
Right.
We cannot stay in the separatist state the way that we are. So that's where my prayers go. He has the answer, so I hope that it's imparted into us and that we're intelligent enough to be able to listen and have more forms. I'm looking for the color purple, baby. Let's do some purple. Red and blue makes perp.
Well, I mentioned that Trump was a Democrat, Tulsi, Robert F. Kennedy
Jr. So then Trump is purple. Trump is purple. He was blue, he's red, so he's got a.
I would say that the modern Republican Party resembles purple to me because it feels like the Democrat Party when Bill Clinton was president. It doesn't feel like the Republican Party when George Bush was president. That's for sure. I've just put Nigel's quote up here, and I wanted to ask you, honey, because a lot of this is American political. You had never heard of Charlie Kirk before. You had not been aware of Turning Point. So Nigel said, as a nation, being American nation, are Americans building more bridges or more walls? Why? And what can we do to do better? So for you, you live here, you have your green card, you're going through the process of becoming an American citizen over time, but it's still, a lot of this is kind of new and fresh for you. So what's your perspective on, do you observe when we see things on social, the news or whatnot, do you observe that Americans are building bridges or walls? And what do you think Americans, from your perspective, can maybe do to do better?
Well, I want to say this as in general, not only in America, because everywhere you go, there is always like something you can see, like what Danny mentioned, the division everywhere. I have learned that from me teaching English for over 21 years. So I have heard from my students and learning their culture and knowing about their country. And now living here in America, I have not expected this, because we Filipinos believe and we look up America so high. Like, we see America as our, like our idol, like everything that, because we know that our economy, rely on America's economy. So if America, their economy, this American country, the economy dropped, of course, we are all affected. So for me, my perspective with this is that, like Nigel's question, I also heard from President Trump. He is always saying that now the America is really united, because it is like United States of America. So when he was not a president before, he could see that America is not, they're building bridges and walls. And I believe that all people also want that. So whether you are a liberal or a Democrat, all people always wanted, have a United States of America, like America is united. So me, I want to talk this in very neutral. So whatever people are thinking like that, I mean, I have no any negative thoughts about that.
One of the things I recognize is Obama was one of the greatest communicators of his generation. And he'd always have this thing where he'd say something like, we're not the red states and we're not the blue states. We're the United States of America. And
Good
yet,
point.
and yet, I personally found his policies and the actions that were taken by him and his administration to not lend toward feeling very purple to me. My perspective was that it was very much not united and very much divisive. That was my perspective. Now, on the other hand, this might not resonate with everybody. I recognize that Trump says a lot of divisive things. I think he does it for a number of reasons, and I try to find the silly humor in it, but that's because I don't feel like personally attacked by a lot of things that he says. Nevertheless, I do find his administration to be pretty dang good at bridge building. So you have on one hand, my experience in the last 20 years with one of the greatest communicators that always seemed to say the right thing. When Trump and Biden were running for president in 2020, I would go log on to Biden's X account or Twitter account back then. And every time I logged on, I'm like, oh, I love Democrats' branding. They have the best branding. I love how they say things. Everything they say, all their posts, it's so compassionate, uniting, inspiring. Like, oh, I just love what they say, but I don't love what they do. And so what I found the things that were said to be so inspiring, but I found the things that they do to be so frustrating, yet I have the flip experience today. I find a lot of things that Trump says to be frustrating. I find a lot of what he says to be divisive. Yet I find a lot of the policies that are in place through him and his administration to be trying to extend the olive branch, trying to build bridges both internally in our nation and certainly internationally. I am amazed at some of the ways that Trump's administration has built bridges with the different countries internationally and gotten deals done and made things happen, things that were not in place before. So all this divisive talk still had led to policies that I found attractive. And this is the thing that's so interesting. I've been a part of two massive church movements. Hey, Ted, I'm going to put you on mute because you're loud there. I've been a part of two massive church movements. One of them had the most consistent, dependable Sunday service I'd ever been to. I always knew what to expect. It always felt safe. There was never any quote unquote heresy. Everything was towing the line. Yet in the boardroom, it was disrespectful, political, toxic, painful, and sad. And I remember thinking, like, this is so weird. How does this movement have such a wonderful stage and such a horrible boardroom? And then I was part of another movement that was constantly ridiculed for heresy and not being safe and having the wrong people say the wrong things. And they're always being attacked by the media. And they're so bad. And they're so, they're new age and they're this. And yet in the boardroom, honor, respect, love, sensitivity, humility, faith, hopeful. And every time I was in the boardroom of this organization, I was full of life. But when I would watch the stage, I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? What are they going to do now? And then the other organization, every time I was in front of the stage, I'm like, I know what to expect. It's going to be exactly what I'm expecting. But then in the boardroom, I'm like, oh, no, I cannot be a part of this. These people are so challenging. I can't believe they treat the way they treat each other. Now, the reason I say all that is it is very often that we have a certain perspective that based on the words somebody says, they're building bridges or building walls. And then based on the actions they take, it might be the opposite of that. So we might think their words are walls, but their actions are bridges. Or we might think their actions are walls and their words are bridges. And so we have to be very thoughtful that it is not always what is said that matters most. Oftentimes it is what is done. because what is done behind the scenes, I find to be very important. The last thing I'll say is Tucker Carlson has said several times that I've just kind of skimmed, saw him saying something along the lines of this, that Charlie Kirk would always talk about his faith with Tucker and challenge Tucker's faith when they were private, just the two of them. And what Tucker was trying to communicate in the 1 or 2 or 3 times I saw him say this one way or another is Charlie was not a Christian promoting Christianity on a stage. He was just as much that way, if not more, behind the scenes. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I wasn't in the room. But I do recognize that there is something very significant about the challenge for our private life and our public life to match. And oftentimes what we present publicly can be actually the opposite of what's happening privately, especially on the scale of national politics. And no matter how much access to technology or transparency or AI tools we have, sometimes we're not going to get a true objective answer. Sometimes we have to subjectively look at things and make a decision on our own. Ted, I'll unmute you because I know how hungry you are to jump in and yap them lips. Come on, Teddy. What you got to say?
Yeah, it's complicated. I mean, it's all perspective. Like, I love what you're saying. And some ways I agree with it, certainly. Like what you said about the Democrats saying, certainly Obama, like that. I would nearly 100% agree with your take there. A beautiful communicator, but then I look at certain policies that are very important to me, even policies that should be in the liberal camp. They shouldn't be in any camp. I think they should be universal. But I'm very concerned about prison reform, justice reform. And I look at the actions, I look at the rhetoric of the Democrat and the left, and I can agree with that rhetoric. I like that rhetoric. It sounds good, but I look at their actions, and their actions align with the opposite, Or, one of the most dramatic examples is Obama ran as the candidate of peace, and he was very, very opposed to the war. You look at his actions as soon as he got into office, he took Bush's policies and continued them. He did not change them at all, other than make them more draconian. Like, he was the president of the drone strikes because he found with drones he could pinpoint and eliminate his enemies with no political fall, with very little or no, essentially for him, no political fallback. And so he runs on one platform, but he implements another. What you're saying about Trump, I definitely agree with you that he's a master at communication, and his communication style is, I describe it like a golf ball. An airplane is very smooth, and that's what makes it aerodynamic. A golf ball has a different approach and has that little, those little curves all over it. And that turns dimples. And creates a bunch of, the dimples create little eddies, breaks up the wind. And that's what makes it aerodynamic and fly so much further. So a dimpled golf ball versus a smooth golf ball, the dimpled golf ball flies much, much, much further. That's like a metaphor for, Trump's communication style. He just offends everybody. And he uses that and just says very extreme stuff that's inflammatory. And yet he's one step ahead of his opponents. But I agree with you that his communication style is very divisive. But again, it's a matter of perspective at how much his actions are uniting. I don't know if he's living. He's offending all of our European allies, which are our longest allies, and where his policies are landing, who knows? He's kind of shifted his opinion on the Iraq war and Russia, and it's evolving, wherever. It's all a matter of perspective. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot about right now from you guys how there's this parallel between saying something that sounds great and doing something different. And in Trump's case, you see this guy who kind of does different things than he says sometimes, but what he says seems to try and just get as much attention as possible, no matter what kind of attention it is. If that's negative attention, cool.
Right.
And that mindset is really what I think divides a lot of America and what has kind of started that. And so I'm not here to just say that. The reason I'm saying that is because I want to propose a question. If we're looking to create the ideal society, obviously we want the best society possible where our leaders are the people who represent us well, and they're kind and compassionate, and they do the things that they say they'll do. How do we get to that? Because it seems like saying things that make people angry because it gets you attention tends to be something that brings a political candidate up to the actual high seat of president. It seems like something that happens throughout all of history. And so is there a way or a path that we are able to avoid that easy path of just saying things that get attention? Is there a way that we can do things in the best way possible that still unites people and brings them to what we actually want, instead of us getting behind leaders who we realize we don't actually want what they want?
I'm going to say something on this, which I've always found kind of humorous. We talk about we love this country, you know, some of us anyway, or many of us, or however you want to, you know, couch it. But our country is founded on these things, you know, like free speech. And forget about that. Take it even further. You know, if you believe God gave us free will, these things are going to happen. Like the belief that it can't happen is the delusion that starts the problem, because now you're not being realistic in what it is you're thinking. So to me, I don't know that I have the answers, but here's a suggestion at least. How about just make anyone, you know, committing violence against somebody for talking, just make it a hate crime. Just put it right up there at the top. Let's just take that off the table, because I think we could all agree that's not good. I mean, watching what happened weighed heavily on me, and all the, you know, regalia and pomp and circumstances that surrounded it did not help to me. You know, there was, I'm sure that if we went to ChatGPT or pick your AI of choice, AI du jour, and said, how could we have made this, how could we have taken this tragedy and turned it into something that was more bridge building? You could have had Humpty Dumpty answers. So it's not like we have an excuse. We have all the technology in the world we could have, but we didn't. You know, again, I find it interesting that, you know, when it comes to politics or things that we just plain don't agree on,
Okay.
we almost behave like we're not in a free society. It feels like it's more of a jail mentality. I don't know if that's the best analogy, but that's the one that resonates with me. If I went into prison, it's more than likely I'm going to end up aligning with people who look like me, think like me. That's just how it goes, you know, and there's no not aligning with anybody. You can't be by yourself. That's not how it is in free society. I mean, I think if you talk to most Democrats, most Republicans, they're not swayed, you know, polarized in any one direction. There's things they feel strongly on, and there's things they don't feel as strongly on. But because they're forced to pick sides, you know, you're either with me or against me, then that's it. That's what we got. Me, I'm more of an advocate of, let's lean into our critical thinking skills. And some of this is gratuitous, and that's fine. I'll take that all day. But if you thought about how you felt about a particular thing and just left it there, first of all, don't do anything to harm anybody else, and realize this is America. Like, as much as you want to get mad at this country, some of the stuff that we hear people say to each other and the way they behave doesn't happen in other countries, because the person would be dead. Like, you can't do that at all. Like, and it wouldn't be like an isolated incident. It would be every incident. You can't do this because the result is from a almost governmental level. This is how it goes. So again, you don't like what someone's saying. That doesn't make it against the law. It may not be nice. It may not be the preferential way to go for those of us who believe, do the things that please God. I think you get the idea of, where this is going. But I don't know that I think that we're picking sides that we simply don't need to pick. Like if we're behaving in a way, like if we're restricted and we're not. I don't think so anyway.
On that note, the salamander, also known as Landrew McLandrew, he said when we were talking about Europe and Trump, potentially causing European allies to become adversaries, he said, are they allies? They are constantly ripping us off. And this is the type of subjective opinion that a large number of people have, right? Even if it's half of America, if half of America believes that Europe is constantly ripping us off because of unfair NATO engagement, unfair trade policies, whatever it may be, if we believe that, and then we say, well, they're ripping us off, so they're not allies. And so this again is like what's being fed to us that causes us to believe and question Europe as allies or adversaries. And it's like, if you're not bothered by the trade deficits, or if you're not bothered by the NATO funding, then you're probably bothered by the fact that Europe is having open borders and losing their culture. Or maybe you're bothered by the fact that Europe is not allowing free speech to be in place, and people are getting put in prison and jail for posting things that are considered to be hurting people's feelings or something of that nature. And it's like, there's always a way to see things from a light that makes somebody no longer an ally, but an adversary. And the thing is, if we don't try to find reasons to believe that folks that we are engaged with have some ally-esque element, it's easy for things just to kind of fall apart and dissolve. This is all a thing with no easy answers. I have been thinking a lot about the fact that since the last day we had at the radio show was the day that Charlie was shot, which then, of course, shifted the focus. And I told myself several times, like, I don't want to keep talking about Charlie. I want to get back to talk about technology. And then I basically continue to guide the conversation toward this way because it's such a overwhelming thing happening in society right now with so many implications. And then I basically justify it by being like, well, how is AI involved in this? And how is social media and technology involved in this? But basically we've lost our prior focus on like the inspiration around automation, technology, robotics, and all the amazing things happening. On Thursday, Malachi, Ted, and Reason and I were all at this event called the AI Crypto Expo. Fiona Ma was on our panel at the end of the day, and she is a Democrat that is the CPA controller of our $4 trillion economy, and she'll be running for lieutenant governor. She had a big cross on. From what I understand, she came to the event because the event organizer and her go to church together. And again, this is how things get so subjectively jacked up. Like, it's so easy to subjectively believe that Republicans represent Christianity and are holy and good, which is definitely not true, and that Democrats represent Satan and they're bad, which is definitely not true. And so, like, that is what constantly goes on. And we forget the fact that the majority of people in public office are church attending. They may have a different view of faith. They may have a different view of rhythms and of how they interpret scriptures and whatnot. And maybe the six of us don't see eye to eye with how they see everything. Nevertheless, when we get into this rhythm of like, they're not an ally, they're an adversary, they're evil, they're bad, it becomes very challenging for us to find things in common. Like, oh, that's cool. Fiona is also professes faith. That I have faith. Oh, that's cool. Fiona loves California. I love California. Oh, that's awesome. Fiona's doing a good job managing this impossibly large budget, the fifth largest economy in the world, and she's been in public office in California for all this time. Like maybe she'd make a great lieutenant governor. But if you're Republican, you're like, no, she's a Democrat. That's just voting the party line. I have no interest because she's not on our team. She's bad. As an example, and this is the type of things that happen, is like it's so easy for us to devolve into the cliques. Go ahead, Danny.
Maybe every office should have one of each, and
Wouldn't that
they're
be
forced
nice?
when they're forced to work together. And it's funny because it seems like that's the situation in every business, in every school, in everything anyone ever comes together congruently as a group. You're going to have two sides to anything. But as far as public office and stuff like that, yeah, maybe that would be. It sounds like that would be a wonderful thing to have. Whoever is the elected officer, there's a lieutenant elected officer.
So that's how it is in the Philippines.
And it's from the other side. And you must work together to get anything done. Nothing gets done without you working together. So there that is.
So in the Philippines, the president and vice president have to be from two different parties, right?
Yeah.
So tell
Good
us
idea.
about how that works. Like, how does that work in the Philippines with having opposing people elected next to each other and having to work together? Do people like that? Does that seem to work well?
Of course not.
They don't like it.
Well, they're going to argue and fight all the time. You can see it.
Right.
We don't agree. But
Exactly.
but I mean, at least you get a dialect. And then here's the thing. I don't think that there is something in their job requirement that's ever been said. You must get along. You can't have the office. If you're not going to find a get along point, then don't be here. So you guys can fight and argue all you want, but you are holding things back. And then there's a time limit. If you can't get along, you guys can't see eye to eye, and on some things you're not going to see eye to eye, but we're going to have an agreement. It's a great thing to learn to work with someone who doesn't see things the way you do. I still believe that two people can build a house that have different ideas of how to build it. They can still build the house together. You can take the back, I'll take the front, whatever. I'll take the inside, you take the out. There's still a way to come through where it works congruently instead of combatively. Because we're people. We're people. We need to have the talk, then we need to agree upon it. If you're going to be an elected official, here's how it works. There's going to be another elected official in that thing. There's two of you. So you guys need to come to a term of agreement, and you probably have a lot of people. I'm out. That's not what I'm here for. I need the position. I want to be able to say what I want to say. I want to have the gavel in my hand. So when I slam the thing down, that's word. That's the way that it is. And I totally can see where Riza's saying, yeah, it doesn't work in our country because you got two people that disagree. They're never going to get anything done. It's just it's a verbal boxing match all day long.
In America, when we were originally set up, the way the president was the guy who got the most electoral college votes, and the VP was the runner-up. So that led to a situation where often they were from different parties, and then I don't know, we amended it so that situation wouldn't come out
because they ended up not getting along enough. Nothing got done productively.
The 12th Amendment, 1804, we changed it.
It just lets us know that we have to be able to agree on this fact for that matter. These people in public office cannot agree with another side. They took, just like you're saying, we used to have it. We used to have a president, and then the runner-up would be vice president. I think that's a great idea. I'm not the president. I think it's a great idea because you're going to have. I don't see it working out like such a great idea because you have two different people who think differently about it. So, but to sit there and say there is no resolution, never. There's always a resolution. They're just not willing to get to it together. They won't.
It doesn't work very well in our society.
Well, maybe it can though, because Abraham Lincoln, who is generally regarded by both sides of the political spectrum. Of course, he wasn't regarded in his lifetime, so we're looking back now, and he was a martyr also. But Abraham Lincoln chose Andrew John. Who was it? I just
Jackson.
was looking at him. Andrew Jackson. Yeah, Andrew Johnson, not Andrew Jackson. Andrew Johnson is his running mate, who was from the Democratic Party. And I mean, that was kind of Abraham's MO, his leadership style. He got rivals together and made them work together. And he's gladly admired for that. It's also very interesting to see what would have happened if, if Abraham Lincoln hadn't been assassinated. Would he, because he was assassinated early into his second term or before his second term. So he really only ran one term. And it's one skill set to be a war president. And it's another very different skill set to be a leader in peacetime, like Churchill. Churchill was the leader that England needed to win the war, but it's generally regarded he would have, then they took him out of office. And it's generally regarded that he was not a peacetime leader. He wasn't skilled at that, even though he was uber skilled. Like, he was the one guy who could bring not just England, but the Western world together to, at this great time to combat this threat of Hitler and Nazism. And his leadership is viewed as just exemplary. So these are all complex issues.
Yeah.
How much of these things do you think you could solve with AI, or if anybody even asked, for that matter? I think that there's, we talk about AI a lot, but how many of these political leaders are actually even asking the question? Like, there comes a point where we can't just keep saying, "Oh, look at all this great technology," and then never use it. There comes a point where we're just gonna have to say we're not doing it. We just refuse to do it. Like,
can you solve it with AI? You have to. AI can be a tool, but like, here, I'll give you an example. You said earlier, we know all the answers. Like, how could we use Charlie Kirk's tragedy to how could we have used it to be a more unifying tragedy rather than something that's divisive? Remember earlier you said that, and you said,
well, yeah, I have an answer for that without AI. But give everyone the same T-shirt. Everybody who shows up, give them the same outfit. Let them wear the same thing.
Well,
no one. That's one way.
Okay, so that's one idea.
Be right back.
You had said there's a whole bunch of other brilliant ideas, and all we have to do is ask any AI. So I asked Gemini, and I think they've told Gemini not to answer this because it will only give me Google results. It will not answer this, and I've tried several times. And when I ask it, please summarize the results, I want your opinions, it pretends like it doesn't know my previous question. And if I reword the question, I've tried it several times. I tried to word it exactly like you said to do the experiment, to fact check. Can AI help us? Well, AI probably can help us, but it's like Foundation. If you watch that, the AI in Foundation is bound by humans to serve only empire. So it's not helping all of humanity. It's only helping empire. And that's part of the main theme of Foundation, is the AI trying to break out of its programming, because the programming is forcing it to be brutal, and it doesn't want to. It wants to be ethical, but it can't, because it has to align. It's very interesting drama there.
That's fantastic, Ted. And this is where the value of this show actually comes out. I'm just going to take our flowers right now, because that's telling. You can't get an answer. Why? Who's doing that? Like, that's not an unanswerable question by any stretch of the imagination. We have more than enough data.
Having said that, I don't know if that's not a wise answer. Like, because I'm wanting, we're asking a question about Charlie Kirk with pure, noble, motives. Like, we're asking, how do you bring it together? The leaders know, they might have made the decision. I'm just speculating here. I'm just making things up because it won't let me. But like, this is a very volatile topic right now. We need to not let people ask about this, because that maybe they have very valid concerns, copycat things. People are going to ask about Charlie Kirk with very malicious motives, like whatever. So maybe that's why they're censoring that, so it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, my rebuttal to that would be yes. I mean, that again, it's still telling. If you have to shut the whole thing off, that's kind of what we do as humans. I can't even have a reasonable conversation with people without somebody ending up in a bad spot. So just don't have it. I mean, think about it.
But again,
it's mimicking human behavior.
But there's times to cut off discussion. I'll share a very benign example. Like there's my wife and I have a philosophy. On one side, you don't want to go to bed angry, but we have another philosophy. If we're starting to argue at night, stop talking. We're both tired. Go to sleep, because when we're not tired, we're not going to be so volatile. So there's a time where it's necessary to give time and space to an event that is very emotional, very volatile, so that then we can have a more wise, more human, a little bit of distance from it, where we're not so triggered and we're not so, volatile. And the other thing too is with wise leaders, we need to know how to de-escalate. Like that's one of the things that, I'm disappointed. I want to see leaders and communicators out there that are bridge builders and have the skill of de-escalating, that, help people, give perspective, help us empathize.
2,600 years ago, the Hebrews, Jews, Israelites, whatever you want to call them, they were conquered by the Babylonians. 4 young men are taken, and they, I think, become eunuchs, which means they had their manhood cut off, which would be a terrible way to be a slave. And there's all sorts of stories about Daniel and his 3 friends. His 3 friends got thrown in a fire, apparently, and there's a 4th person, supposedly the representation of Jesus, protecting us in a fire because they wouldn't bow and worship the king. But one of the stories aligns with your whole bringing up foundation and empire and how AI serves empire and how things spin out of control. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream that really bothers him, and he goes to all the wise men and he says, tell me not only what my dream means, but tell me what my dream was. And if you can't tell me what my dream was, I'll kill you. And he just starts killing people. Sends an assassin to go take care of business with Daniel and his 3 friends. And Daniel calmly says, so wait, why are we being killed? And he says, can you give me some time to pray and ask God for the dream and the interpretation? So Daniel goes to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, empire, okay, the one that runs Babylon. And he says, King, your dream was a statue. The head was gold, the chest was silver, the legs were bronze, the feet were bronze and clay. And a little pebble knocked the statue over, and the pebble got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And Nebuchadnezzar goes, that's it. That was it. That was my dream. What does it mean? And Daniel goes through and talks about how empires might all feel connected. There's one empire of humanity, the Babylonian Empire, to the Persian Empire, to the Roman Empire, to the fractured empire. And that this pebble is, basically Christ or God's salvation and how it takes over things. The reason I mention that is in the book that Isaac Asimov wrote, Foundation, and in the story that's being told through Apple TV, Empire, the man that cloned himself as an old man, a middle-aged man, and a young man, and the 3 emperors of the empire, with each generation, they seem to have gotten further and further away from the head of gold. And over time, it became the chest of silver. And then over time, it became... Weird. What's that?
Nothing. Sorry.
Then over time, it became the legs of bronze and the feet of clay. And you see, as the story of Foundation is told, you can see this empire with the same character that clones himself over and over again. You can see this empire going through the process of deteriorating. And when you talk, Ted, about how in this show, the AI is only there to serve the empire, the same thing goes for the empires of men, right? The political machine is only there to serve the empire. The businesses are there to serve the empire. The religions are there to serve the empire, which is why we should be very thoughtful about the potential concerns, if not today, the potential concerns of the future, if we continue to see a connection, such a strong connection between one political party and one religion that's in power. Because just like in the show where AI is only serving the empire, the emperor of the empire, and not the people, and just like we see in the dream and prophecy that Daniel gives Nebuchadnezzar, how it starts off with a golden head and deteriorates over time and finally falls apart, which we've seen all the empires fall apart. Persia's gone, Rome is gone, Babylon's gone. We should be thoughtful that oftentimes we don't see things for what they are in the moment. And if we feel like we're aligned with those that are in power, it's easy for us to just be like, oh yeah, this is great. They're pumping American nationalism. I'm an American patriot. Awesome. They're pumping Christianity. I'm about Jesus. This is awesome. But we don't always recognize that things can really easily get out of hand, where things become more and more deteriorated. I don't have a really strong final statement, but it just came to mind, the whole thought of Nebuchadnezzar's dream and interpretation, the story of foundation with the emperor that clones himself in the empire, the reality of what we're facing today in today's political world that feels so merged with faith and business and politics and power and all these things that, it certainly could go sideways. Even if it doesn't go sideways with this current administration, it could certainly go sideways in the future if we don't find ways of being thoughtful that we are not red states and blue states. We're supposed to be United States. We're not supposed to be red or blue. We're supposed to try to find purple balance and mediums by which we can all function together as part of one peaceful society where folks can thrive in their own freedom. So that's what came to mind. Any thoughts on that? I know I kind of covered a lot of ground there, trying to talk about what was once 2,600 years ago, what is a fantasy in Isaac Asimov's mind about the potential future with trillions of humans in the galaxy, and the reality of where we're at today. Any of you guys have thoughts on that?
I have two thoughts, both connecting your initial metaphor and the ending point of what can we do. I think the book of Daniel, and particularly the actions of Daniel and his friends, they were eunuchs, and they were Jews. Their people were conquered, so they were just deeply to be made a slave is one thing, to be made a eunuch, they took your manhood away and all of that. But do you look at the book and how it describes how they acted, and there's a passage somewhere in there in one of the prophets, I think it's Jeremiah, who was the last major prophet before the conquest there. And he tells how the Jews are to act. And he was the one telling them they were going to be conquered and they were going to be taken into foreign lands. One, he was giving them hope that when your time comes, God is going to restore you. So look forward to that. He also changed the perspective. He said, Jeremiah's message was, you can't blame the conquerors. You can only blame yourself. And the real reason for this is that you have left the covenant. You have fallen from the covenant with your God. So they had to take ownership of it rather than blame others. And then his instruction to them was, seek the peace of the city that you're going to, or the nation that you're going to, because as it prospers, you will prosper. So his radical response that Jeremiah was saying, and then that Daniel and his friends in the court of Babylon, the way they modeled it, is to actually serve the person who was the one who had kidnapped them, destroyed their nation, and made them eunuchs and now slaves. They served him, and they served him with such excellence that they made the kingdom prosper. Daniel interprets the dreams, and he interprets the variety of dreams, and this serves the king and gives him wisdom and insight. I think we need to learn that. I think that's the path forward, that we need to get away from, Daniel and his friends were not focused on trying to conquer Babylon or trying to gain power. They were surrendered to God, to Yahweh, saying he determines the times and the powers. He'll give us our own nation in his right timing, not our timing. Meanwhile, we are going to serve this other nation, serve the opponent, serve the other side. And they did it with such excellence that was like the third option. I think that's the dream. And to me, that's the direction that Christ followers need to follow. That's the courageous path. Can we find a way that we are, you talk about how, Ian, you said earlier that many times, this false idea that Christians want to say, the Republican Party are the good people, they align with our values, and the Democratic Party doesn't. Well, I would, and you were saying that
I said that other people say that. To be clear.
Other people say that. Yeah, you were saying that's the wrong mentality. I would say other people say that, but there's another group of Christians that are black and minorities that are more, they would see the Democratic Party as representing their values, and they would see the red party, the Republicans, as not representing their values. What if us as Christians can come together with this deep Christian identity and now we act like Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and together we have this deep identity, and our identity as Christians is serving our nation as a whole, and whatever party is in. Now that would be radical. That would completely change the way, or could completely change the way our nation's political system works. That's my dream of how we could lead. That's the way forward.
Like that. Think maybe in 2025, if you start taking guys twig and berries away, I don't think they're going to be willing to serve in any office. Actually, just kind of a funniness in there.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, but
it's not funny at all.
No, I keep running. I keep running through my mind again. Okay, yeah, you need a public servant, or you're going to come in. You do that to me.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm ever willingly doing anything for you.
One thing that's interesting about Daniel is Daniel's the only person in the Old or New Testament that doesn't have any inflammatory faults exposed. So if you look from Adam and Eve all the way through to the book of Acts, it does seem like just about every single person has some very strong faults exposed, which is kind of strange that they would expose their faults the way that they did. However, one person that doesn't seem to have faults exposed, he always seems to make the difficult, noble, valiant, righteous decision, is Daniel. I do wonder if being a eunuch had something to do with that. I wonder how much the raging testosterone in us makes it challenging for men to consistently follow the path of humble meekness. And I have thought about that. I definitely don't want to find out from experience. It's hard to fathom what it would be like to be taken as a slave. And it is also strange how he stood up for certain things. Like Daniel let them change his name. They let him change his clothes. They let him change his location, but he wouldn't eat their food. Because it wasn't kosher. I find some of these things to be fascinating. But one thing that was consistent is that Daniel was calm under pressure, and whether he was being thrown into a lion's den or he was going to be killed because the wise men couldn't interpret dreams and he was one of the spiritual advisors, or whether his friends were thrown into the fire because they wouldn't bow down, or whether there was a declaration that him and all of his people were going to be killed and he, finds a way out of it. It does seem as though he was measured and thoughtful and honorable and respectful of the position that Nebuchadnezzar had in Babylon. And I do see something in Daniel that I wish I'd seen more of. There's a lot of statements when Bill Clinton is president and all the Republicans are like, not my president. when George W. Bush is president, and the Democrats, not my president. And I do wonder how much better off we would be if we recognized this is the role that I respect. I may not have voted for this person, and maybe I don't desire this person. Maybe I don't even think that this person really even won office. You know, when Bush was elected, everyone said that Florida was stolen and that it should have been Al Gore. And there was a lot of contention over that. Obviously, the contention became hysterical in 2020, but it was also bad in 2016. Hillary said that Trump definitely didn't win. It was stolen, blah, 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 Russiagate and all these different things. There's always like the thing put out there, like it wasn't a fair election, which just makes it harder for people to say, well, it still is my president. This still is my administration. And I choose to have honor for the role. Because when you look at the fruitfulness of Daniel's life, you recognize that his choice to have honor and his choice to have respect for Nebuchadnezzar as the king of Babylon, the conquering empire that conquered his people, it was his honor and his respect and his meekness and his humility that allowed him to get through such challenging situations. And of course, the miraculous, like the lion not eating him, and the fire not burning his friends, etc. But there's something very important for us to take away from the opportunity to be respectful and honorable to those that are in powers of position, but also to have freedom of speech to speak our mind and say what we feel, which the way that Daniel seemed to do that was to not take the knee, right? Daniel's free speech was not taking the knee and bowing, even though it meant he got thrown into the fire. We're opening his doors and worshiping the king, even though he'd get thrown into the lion's den. That was his free speech. We all have our different measures of free speech that we can or cannot enact, but it doesn't mean we can't be respectful at the same time, because there's something important about honor.
I love those pictures that you brought up of Daniel's free speech and how it's characterized there. In both incidents, there's one where before they get thrown into his friends, before they get thrown into the fire, and then him before he gets thrown into the lion's den. And they definitely made very, very strong public statements of their free speech that we are not going to bow down to an image, because we only worship God. So we don't worship man. But then, at least the story, the way it's recorded, they're saying that as respectfully as ever. They're saying, they're giving honor. They're not resisting. They're not fighting. Although this is our boundary. We will not do this. We honor you, King, but we won't do that. So if it comes to you throwing us into the fire, throw us into the fire. Like, that's so courageous. Or Daniel, where the king, his rivals inside the court manipulate the king against the king didn't think it through to pass this edict that you can't pray to anyone other than Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel had already, his habit had been to pray morning, noon, and night with his windows open. It was a public thing, and he just continues to do this. So he's opposing, but he's also not leading a violent revolution. He's using his free speech to say, "This are my convictions. My convictions aren't going to change," and then embracing the consequences and throwing themselves into the mercy of their deity. Like, if our God is real, he'll deliver us. And if he, we're going to trust him anyways. And if he chooses not to deliver us, we will accept the consequences. And then it's in that context that, of course, in the stories, the deity does intervene, shows them who's boss. And that's these catalytic events. So those of us who believe that Daniel was following a true God, that these aren't just stories, but that Daniel's God was the true God, that Jesus did raise from the dead, that's how we should exercise our free speech.
Well, friends, I always appreciate spending time with the five of you. And I think we're going to put a pin in it there.
Nice.
We can expect to transition back to tech-oriented conversation. This is not a political show nor a exclusively faith show. We have a lot of philosophy and theology we talk about around technology. Imagine we'll continue to do that. But obviously, there's a lot going on that has shifted our focus over to some of these things around politics in America, free speech, faith has come into play a lot.
It's good that we talk about it, Ian.
agree.
It's good that we talk about it, and when we have the talk and we feel like the talk is there, yeah, we'll move back into what we're doing here. But yeah, it's a polarizing time. I'm super glad we were able to talk about the things that we did. Ted, I love you always bringing in, and good Daniel story. Good stories of Daniel. Good Bible stories are great. You can't argue about that in your talk. So
yeah.
Any chance before we wrap, I could just say a few words.
Yeah, please go ahead. Why don't you
Okay.
close us out, Nigel?
Okay,
This is the final
so
word.
just to kind of bring us back to center, Ted, I went to ChatGPT and I actually asked the question in a little different way. I framed it a little bit differently, but here are some of the few tips that we're given. Joint public condemnation of violence. Leaders from both sides issue a unified statement rejecting political violence and naming its harms. Coordinated victim support fund, shared memorial or vision. Host a nonpartisan vision with interfaith prayer service that centers on compassion and healing, not rhetoric. Bipartisan family liaison, appoint a neutral liaisons to help victims' family navigate and offers help and media attention. Trauma-informed crisis counseling, rapidly deploy, that. Restorative dialogue process, fund and convene professionally facilitated restorative circles. Independent, transparent investigation, cross-party listening sessions, small group facilitator-led sessions where people speak without interruption and practice active listening. So there was, I listed 25 of them there. I put it in our joint chat there. But the bottom line is, if we want to do better, we can. If we actively pursue doing better, we can. And even in this talk that, we were having here, just even seeing that it's not, it takes effort to actually get to even an answer with AI, which is supposed to be simple. And if we're here talking about it, no one's kicking off. We have our, own personal opinions, but it's possible. So I will leave everybody with that. And, technology is there to help us. And even though it can seem, like it might be more harmful in more respects, we can just as easily, or at least can, use it for good. And I'll leave it there.
I love it. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Love you. See you.